We're missing Dave.
Fourth item, I think it's going to go very quickly. And we've got staff here for that one. I think these may take a little bit longer because we've got some public input. I wonder if we should bump this one up. I don't see Thomas McKinney. There he is. I wonder.
Ready? Okay, we'll get started. We'll begin our meeting tonight with a prayer from Brian Smith. Following that, Ed Jones will lead us in the pledge.
Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we come before Thee this evening and we give Thee thanks for the wonderful city that we live in, the state that we live in, for our wonderful neighbors and the volunteering spirit of the people that live here. We ask Thy guidance as we discuss matters of the city, that we might do the things that would be most pleasing to Thee and that would promote a great city for our neighbors. And we ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Will you please follow me in pledging allegiance to a non-existent flag?
Got to be the NFL. Must be involved.
Put one up on the computer.
Probably didn't want to put it on the screen. Okay. It works. Scouts are doing
There we go. We'll allow it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Again, just by way of notice, those items that we'll be hearing tonight that are marked with a star are require legislative action by the municipal council, so we'll simply be forwarding recommendations to them. Items without a star are not legislative, and therefore the decisions we make here are final. Okay, before jumping into the items, we'll take roll, starting on my left. If you'd state your name and if you have any conflicts of interest with any of the items.
Andrew Howard, no conflicts.
Edward Jones, no conflicts.
Jamin Rowan, no conflicts.
Maria Winden, no conflicts.
Dave Anderson, no conflicts.
Brian Smith, no conflicts.
Okay. Bill Pepperoni recommended just doing a slight change in the order in which we'll hear some of these items, and it made sense to me. Item number 4, he suggested would go relatively quickly. We have city staff on hand, and rather than make them extend their already long day, we'll hear item 4 first, and then we'll proceed in order at that point, 1 through 3. So, item number 4. Here we go. Provo City Parks and Recreation Department requests project plan approval for renovations to the Provo River Trail between Columbia Lane and approximately 2580 West. That covers the North Park, Dixon, and Lakeview neighborhoods. And Austin Corey is presenting this item to us tonight.
Hi, thank you. The section that you mentioned of the Provo River Trail is currently in need of some maintenance activities, and as part of that, Parks Department has been allocating some funds and looking for ways to actually improve the Provo River Trail. The aerial you see here gives you an idea of the areas that the trail exists there right now, but they're looking to widen the trail, improve the trailhead locations with more amenities, as well as some improvements to the underpass areas, getting them basically about as wide and more accommodating as they can. So in this image, this just gives you some examples of, there's a myriad of improvements happening along there. They're all similar in nature to this. On the top left, you can see the trailhead that's currently at Geneva Road, the improvements that they're looking to make to include some gathering spaces and some benches and more of an amenity there. The lower right is some improved signage that actually matches our wayfinding package that has been adopted by the city. So it matches with that and provides some better wayfinding along the trail and just some improvements. In the top right, that's one that I wanted you to see. It's difficult to do considering the Provo River itself, but they're looking for ways that they can widen those trails as they cross under as much as they can, as well as you can see this dashed line is the existing wall. They're looking to reduce the height of the wall as much as they can, given flood elevations and things like that. Again, to try to reduce the perception of passing through and increase the safety as pedestrians and bikes use that trail. Anyway, that's the essence of the plans, and staff has reviewed that. The CRC has gone through. The only remaining items are a couple just assurances that Public Works is looking for as far as utilities, making sure there's not conflicts there. So we recommend approval with the condition that they resolve those concerns through the CRC.
Great. Any questions for Austin? Ed?
Do you have estimated cost, and do you have any kind of statistics on the usage?
We do have Thomas McKenna from the Parks Department that's here. I don't know how much of that he came prepared with today, but I'm sure he could give you a better idea than I could.
Okay.
Has the item already been budgeted for in the city's budget?
Yes, in order to move forward with a project plan, there's a long process of getting funding
I
allocated.
figure. Thank you.
Any other questions before we hear from Thomas for staff? Okay. In that case, we'll invite Parks and Rec representatives to come forward and answer both Mr. Jones' question and offer any other insights or material that you feel would be relevant.
So you had the question on the budget or the cost of these improvements. So we've allocated $3.2 million for these renovations. So the estimate that's come in thus far is about $5.8 million. So we've prioritized what's going to go in first. And mainly that involves widening the trail and really those safety features, improving the underpasses, adding the signage, and really widening the trail. That's going to happen first. The things that are needed most is the process that we're gonna. I mean, that's the plan that we have in place at this point.
And the usage?
I don't have the usage calculations or the usage information off the top of my head, but I can get that to you. It's very well used. Would you like? I mean, I could send that to you. How would you like me to get that information to you?
Well, maybe not the numbers, but you say it's well used?
Yeah, there's several. I know that there is some data available on the usage, and I know it's in the thousands, tens of thousands in some areas. So
Per what?
I think it's monthly, the data that they have, but I've got to confirm that.
Every time I'm on it, I see 10 people.
Well, that's pretty good.
That's not bad.
So there is a lot. I mean, there's thousands of users on a month-to-month basis. And then there's specific sections that are more used than others.
Sure.
So,
Okay, thank you.
wow.
So if there's a shortfall in the budget, and do things not get completed, are they carried over to the next fiscal year, or how's that handled?
So, but we're going to determine that of how to approach that.
But the plan stays in effect until it's done, is that how it
Correct.
works?
That's the plan.
Okay.
What's the source of funding for the project?
So fortunately, with the passing of the RAP tax that happened, a little over a year ago, that's part of the funding. Also impact fees,
Impact
and then some county grant money that we'll be using. The majority of the funding is coming from the RAP tax.
I had a question about the phasing and timeline. Are you going to start with 1S, 2S, 3S, 4S, and work that way up from the west, or?
So this plan that you see, that whole area is the south package from Columbia Lane up to 2230 North. There is another package. This is really the first phase. The plan is to do this entire phase
All at one time?
all at one time.
Okay, great. I mean, I know there's some pretty dire needs right around, 3S with the KOA.
Yeah, we're so excited for that with the acquirement of the acquisition of the KOA property.
Fantastic.
We're going to open that up and make that a lot more
Good.
appealing and safe.
So with the funding that's available now, is this winter work that will be done in the spring, or?
So the plan right now is to finish the CRC process. I actually got the plans in during about 5:30 today. We'll be submitting those. Then they'll be going out to bid. The plan is about probably late winter to start, just so we want to plan just when the asphalt, plants open again, so we can hit the ground running then.
Great.
Swindon.
When you were talking about the budget, you said that the amount that's been allocated isn't quite the amount that was quoted to complete the project. And you mentioned the things that you were going to do to start with, but I didn't hear that you had enough, or I didn't hear you mention lighting. Is that going to be able to be done initially, or is that something you're going to have to wait on?
That is, I have not confirmed that, but that is part of the plan, is to add lighting. We would hope to have that part of the first phase, but we'll have to confirm that once the bids come in.
Thank you.
Last one from me, not quite related to this project, but we love to ride our bikes along the trail going north along the lake shore, and would love to see that connect, of course, into the trails that go up all the way to the Linden Marina eventually. Is that on a kind of how far out is that? There's always talk about hooking it all up so it's all connected. Is that something that's talked about much?
The area down by the lake you're talking,
Yeah, past the boat harbor going north right along.
I know that there's plans with the Provo River Delta Restoration Project for some trail improvements there. That's really what will come first.
Okay.
There's actually quite a bit that will be going on there, which is nice.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll open this up for public comment, beginning with any neighborhood chairs from the North Park, Dixon, or Lakeview neighborhoods. Any neighborhood chairs from those neighborhoods that wish to address this item? Okay, any other neighborhood chairs beyond those neighborhoods that wish to address this item? If not, we'll open up to the public. For any comments, feel free to come forward. State your name and
My name is Beth Alec, and I am Lakeview North Neighborhood Chair. I just wanted to make one comment about it. You're noticing on these affected Fort Utah neighborhood and Lakeview South neighborhood, and it was only noticed to Lakeview North. So just in future reference, when you're noticing for the parkway, for the trail along the river, it's Fort Utah and Lakeview South. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll close public comment and return to the Planning Commission, and I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed project plan for renovations of the Provo River Trail between Columbia Lane and 2580 West. Contingent that all the technical requirements are resolved through the CRC.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Mrs. Wyndham with the second. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate. Aye.
Aye.
There are any opposed? Okay, approval is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, let's get back to the beginning now with items 1 and 2, which I will read in together, though we will take separate motions for them. But in terms of presenting and discussion, we'll combine them. Item number 1, Gardner and Associates requests a zone change from residential conservation, RC, to low-density residential, LDR, for .642 acres of property located at 925 East, 1140 South, and that's in the Spring Creek neighborhood. Item number 2, Gardner and Associates requests project plan approval for a 9-unit townhome development located at 925 East, 1140 South, in a proposed low-density residential zone, again, in the Spring Creek neighborhood. Brian Maxfield will be presenting these 2 items to us tonight.
Thank you. The first item, this shows a location. If you're not familiar with it, you have the cemetery is the most recognizable landmark with South State Street going down, and then 1140 South. It's really with the Spring Creek development that's occurring on this vacant property where I'm circling the laser. This is one of the remaining pieces left in that neighborhood. This map shows the general land use plan, which shows it as residential. Recently, you approved and the council approved the Southeast Neighborhood Area Plan. It shows a little more specifically in terms of land use and shows low-density residential for the site. And then the current zoning, which shows the RC residential conservation zone. In looking at the site, this is a colored drawing, show the 9 townhome units. They'd be separated into 2 sections, one of 5 units, one of 4 units. The area surrounding that, you can see from this air photo, you have Copenhagen townhomes, which are to the north, and the Scandia Village, which are to the east. It should be noted that 950 is actually a private road tied in with Scandia Village and was set aside for their visitor parking specifically, but it is a private road from that area, and I think we brought that out in some of the discussion conditions. This shows a little bit more of the detail to the north, which shows the 10 townhomes opposite, where actually there are 3 units in each of these inside units, so it's a few more units than even 10, it's 14, so it wouldn't be without, it would not be in, let me say that, it would be in keeping with the neighborhood. How about that? Trying to avoid the double negative there. The elevations are shown here with the materials. Shows up a little bit better, I think, on your screen than it does on the display up on top there. But you can see each of the units would have different colors and different styles kind of built into the units. The units are elevated. The rear load garage. You also would have a driveway area in front of that garage. So in the end, it equates to 4 spaces directly associated with each unit plus 3 additional spaces, which would be visitor parking. So the end result is that you have 4.33 units or parking spaces per unit. The requirement's 2.25, which you can argue whether that's low or high or whatever else, but it shows that they're plus 2 units over the normal requirement. You can see from the side elevation or side view that these are elevated up to the first floor. It varies because the property actually slopes downward on this, and so you've got an elevation change where it's deeper on the east end and then shallower on the west end. Again, this shows a general layout that shows two cross-section areas, which an A and a B. And if you look at this, you can see the depth of the parking on the adjacent property, which would be the Copenhagen development, and then the fence height, and then how that equates to the adjoining property. And then B, which is the one a little bit further east, where it's a little bit deeper up to the fence, if you can see the difference on that. I believe the developer can certainly go into more detail on the actual structures and some of those materials being used. Are there any questions?
Any questions for staff at this point?
A question about the concrete parking pads behind the units. It looks like the depth of that pad is going to match the depth of the guest parking spaces.
Correct, it's 18 feet. This, it's a little deceiving because you have an overhang from a deck that's over the top. So if
Right.
you look at the map, the spaces actually go underneath that deck. And so they do have an 18-foot depth on that. I should note, I apologize for this, the setback on this building's a little bit closer than the normal, but it is an allowed consideration of the community development director to look at the situation and how it fits in. And in this case, it allowed us to have that deeper parking and more parking spaces that we could have on site without what we feel sacrificing the nature of the neighborhood at all. It just really gave us an opportunity to address an issue that's prevalent in that neighborhood.
Just relative to the design, I feel comfortable that there's adequate. It seems like there's a lot of discussion about parking. If there's 18 feet available, there, so you'd have 2 parking spaces behind each 2-car garage, which is, I think, how staff's calculating it, right? Then I think there's adequate parking. If there's less than 18 feet, and looking at one image, it looks like there's less, but looking at that one, I think it's pretty clear that it's at least 18 feet deep, so. That's quite a bit of parking.
Could even be
for a
19.
townhome. Yeah.
Let me get a bonus.
Which would help, so, thanks.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
One
go ahead,
quick
Ms. Cindy.
question. Where would the garbage dumpster go? Would there be space here at the very end, near this last guest parking space?
They proposed for the size of this unit, they'd have individual
Trash can.
trash cans, put those out. I know that may be something you want the developer to talk about. Obviously, you're going to have on-street parking in this area for visitors and other people, but see if, it might be able to detail that a little bit more.
Thank you.
If, the way you'd have to do it is you'd end up sacrificing maybe some of the other spaces and the visitor ones if it ended up as on-site. But
Okay, invite the applicant to come forward and present any additional information.
Hi, I'm John Dester, Georgetown Development, and Dave's asked me to explain it because we're actually the designer of it. It's virtually a. That will advance them. Okay. Is it also a laser pointer?
Yeah, right in the middle, the button right in the middle.
In the middle. Okay. I'm John Dester. I live here in Provo. My business is here in Provo, and we had just finished a project earlier this year that looks very similar to this. I mean, it's identical. It's on 5th West and 3rd North, and it's called Dixon Place, and it's now finished. And I wonder, Dave, if you were looking at a picture of Dixon Place, I didn't know which picture you were seeing where the, you mentioned an image where it didn't look like it was deep enough. That may be our other project because we didn't have parking behind it.
It looks like it's 2 times 8 on one image, but I think the other image makes it clear that it's.
Just to address that, I wanted to zoom up and see if we have, that's Dixon Place right there. And you guys are able to see that at the same time, right? Yeah. The back right there, if you were seeing something like this, that isn't 18 feet.
Yeah.
These were built without the parking behind it. So in this project, we had additional parking in the adjacent property. But we think it's a huge benefit to have the parking the way this is, to where every homeowner has 2 spaces right behind his garage door, total of 4 per home. Brian did a great job of actually explaining most of the things that I had written here and touched on. I'll just mention a couple of other things. It's very similar to the rest of the neighborhood in that there's lots of townhomes there. I built a number of them in Eastgate project 10, 15 years ago, at least, is down there and across the street. These are bigger. The total square footage that's finished, that can be finished in these, is 1,772. So they're decidedly larger homes than the ones that I built before, or I think than Scandia would be. We have lots of parking, of course, we touched on that. I like building projects, as you guys know, that are pretty traditional. And the reason that I do that is I feel strongly that the architecture is timeless, that those that are built this way, and actually I quite like the way Scandia and Copenhagen were built years ago, in that, so the whole neighborhood looks quite good. There are some that are further to the east that are a little plainer, and those aren't my favorite, even though there's a lot of brick involved. But we like doing them to look like this. And the predominant building material is stone and brick and stucco. And then we do have some accents that are done in vinyl siding, so that those are the vertical siding that you see on the top, and some shingles and things. That's a low maintenance product, so that they stay looking nice for a long time. Do you have any questions? Because Ryan really did a good job of explaining everything. Yes.
Yeah, but just anticipating, given the staff report's notations about neighborhood issues being on-street parking, can you maybe just kind of anticipate some of those that we might hear tonight, and maybe tell us a bit about the conversation and the just the dialogue you've had with the neighborhood about on-street parking? I mean, obviously, given the number of parking spaces, you're clearly well over the number of spaces that are required. And it would seem that would go a long ways in mitigating some of those fears, but nevertheless, it looks as if the fears are persisting about on-street parking. And
we have tried to mitigate it, and having as many as 4 dedicated spaces per home, and 3 extra spaces that are just random because we had the space to do it. We think that's a lot of parking, and it'll prove to be a lot of parking. But I can't prohibit or any, it's a public street in front of us. On 2 sides are public streets, on the west side and the south side. And parking's allowed on those streets. I think who's using it now, there are cars parked there all the time right now. I actually think it's the trailer court to the south of us, that they don't have enough parking. And so people with trucks and stuff like that just seem to be parking right in front of our property where we'll build these townhomes. And I don't know what to do about that. You know what I mean?
well, and maybe I should have been even more specific. I mean, although that's really helpful to know. And again, I'm sure we'll get into this more, but the neighborhood issues were specifically about on-street parking on 950 East, rather than 1140 or 900.
Right. We've looked at that, and I don't know if that could be red curbed or something, but it is a private street going into Copenhagen, I think it is. So the neighborhood chair's here, and maybe she could speak to that, but I'm not too worried about any of our occupants really parking over there, because it's too easy to park in their garage, under their deck, or literally out in front and walk in the house if they wanted to do a quick stop, for example.
Right.
So I don't see these folks bothering to park on 950. There's not an easy way, even if you parked up there, I guess you could walk down the sidewalk and go in, but whatever. If you want us to build a fence up there or red curb it, no problem.
Yeah, I mean,
Did you put a sign up, that just says
I don't know that I
parking?
share
Yeah.
the fears, not knowing. I mean, again, I'm sure we'll hear more about them. Then maybe just one more and maybe I should have asked this of staff, but in our staff report, there's in the staff analysis and conclusion section on page 3 of the second item's staff report, it says something about, although it would not be a guarantee of prevention, staff would recommend having a disclosure statement within the Rose Court CCNRs, as well as a disclosure document distributed by the developer to any buyer of the units. Must mean about parking on 950 East or somewhere. I mean, are you aware of that suggestion or recommendation, and how? Tell me just a little bit of background about that conversation.
No problem to do that. If that was just an additional measure to serve notice to the people who live there that 950 East is a private street, that's no problem, putting that language in
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Is that what staff had in mind with the disclosure, just to say that? I mean, I wondered what.
Because it didn't say disclosure to do what. you
Yeah,
know.
that was my.
Disclosure that that's a private area and it's not parking for their, not only the tenants, but also visitors, I think would be important. You know, that they advise visitors to park in front or on their pad sites or something.
Okay, and so the applicant seems very willing to include that language in a CCNR. Okay.
You bet.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks.
We'll open up both of these items now to public, beginning with the neighborhood chair of the Spring Creek neighborhood. Invite her to come forward and address this item.
Mary Miller, Spring Creek Neighborhood Chair. We actually put this out on Facebook in July, and it was pretty negative, actually. And so my husband and I went, checked out the one that they had already built. We're very impressed with that. Felt like this could be an excellent thing for our neighborhood. And at our neighborhood meeting, that was the same feeling that came out. However, we cannot ignore the elephant in the room. And we know that that street, it's not going to change. It isn't people from the mobile home park. It is people in Eastgate who are renting to students over occupancy, and they are very concerned about that. One other thing that was mentioned at the neighborhood meeting, which is also in the recommendation, the staff recommendation, that the developer considered doing what's the word I'm looking for? A landscape plan with trees, because that was one of the things that many of the people who live at that back fence had said, rather than us just looking down on a black asphalt, large area, could we ask the developer to put some trees in along that? And as I looked at what was there before, it doesn't look like there's going to be space. So I'm wondering if he's willing, to work a little bit with us. The other concern, again, goes back to the parking. What will the distance be from the front of from the steps to the sidewalk? Will there still be a sidewalk there, a public sidewalk? And if so, how large is that front, that little postage stamp front lawn? And then will the sidewalk also go up the west side? Those are some concerns. So I don't know, as I indicated, and I took the full report back to the neighborhood so that they knew we were actually invited in, oddly enough, by one of the people who live in the other development that was made known to us. We did not expect that. She just opened her door and invited my husband and I in. We toured her home. It was absolutely beautiful. There is a space on the lower level of each one of those 9 units for an additional room, and I don't know if it's going to be finished at the same time as the other units. And when we were, I wish I knew the name of the other one. I feel silly saying the other place. At any rate, she indicated that she had hers finished. It's a very small room down there, and it goes directly into the garage. She also said that most of those in the previous development on 5th West and 3rd North are occupied by one person. However, there is a unit that is students. And so they are finishing that lower level for another bedroom to put more students in with cars, and we all know where that goes. So that is a concern on this one as well. The concern is that that would put an additional burden on the parking as well. If any developer, or not developer, any person who purchases these, who is looking to make some serious cash flow by putting in there as many as possible, could aggravate the parking, which we already know. I mean, I brought pictures before, I'm sure that, and I think all of you know exactly what it's like over there. We do, however, feel that this would be a great asset to the neighborhood. And they were wondering if the developer would consider 4 and 4, if we just had a little bit more space, and not pack in quite as many. But I think that's it. You're certainly welcome. I mean, when we first put this on Facebook, I will just tell you what the, oh goodness, let me find it really quickly. Oh, here it is. We actually had 9 people who were not in favor of this at all because of the parking. And that was the concern that was voiced every time. Promise us the parking isn't going to be worse than it already is. And so it is a concern. And I understand that, you know, they may have taken some pictures, they may have looked, but unless you live there and you deal with it day in and day out, it's not real. It's just not accurate. So that's all I have. And do you have any
Thank you.
questions of me?
Thank you very much. We'll invite the applicant to follow the public comment and address some of the
Okay.
issues that you raised. So
That would be
he'll be
great.
able to speak
Thank
to.
you.
Okay. Are there any other neighborhood chairs present that wish to speak to these 2 items? If not, we'll open it up to public.
Hi, my name is John Langford. I live about a block north of this property here. So yeah, I guess my main concern that could exist is parking. Yeah, so it's, from my experience, it's fairly common to see space for at most 5 or 6 cars along the south and west sides of this development. So that definitely is important that there are as many parking spots as they're planning on doing. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, just make sure that there's the parking that they want is my main concern. Another question, probably for whenever the developer gets up, I'm wondering what the expected purchase price is for these properties. Because I guess my main concern there would be I want to make sure that it stays a nice neighborhood with people, like not really poor neighborhoods kind of popping up. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Any other members of the public that wish to speak to these 2 items? Okay, if not, we'll invite the applicant to come forward and address whatever the questions or concerns that were raised, and then we'll move from there back to the Planning Commission.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity to address them. Yes, the property has a sidewalk in front of it. That was a question. And the distance between the front of the townhomes and the curb out in front is 25 feet. So it's really going to have the same kind of appearance or whatever as our residential neighborhoods in the city, because the front setback now is, I think, 25 feet. Is it not, you guys? Is it? It used to be 30 all those years ago when it's 25 feet, the standard now for a home.
It's 20 actually, and for
Really,
single-family homes.
Okay.
But that's to the
LDR
property line,
Yeah,
right?
From
That's
property
property
line, which with the changes ends up as the distance behind the curb or behind the sidewalk, whichever's greater. So it's 23 behind the curb, 14 behind the sidewalk.
Is the typical setback.
Right. And if you think about it, the 14 behind the sidewalk and you have the sidewalk
Yeah.
in at 6 feet, that's 20 feet.
The distance from the unit itself to the sidewalk, what's that,
Is
12?
15.
It's 15?
15, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've built similar townhomes with as little as 5 feet, 6
Yeah.
feet there. We don't have any extra room on this, I can tell you that. It's very precise from the back fence to the curb. It works the way we have it, and it doesn't really work well if we have to adjust anything, literally. We had just enough feet to make it work.
You're going to get to the question, I'm sure, about landscaping on the north property line, trees.
I heard that was that someone brought that up in the neighborhood meeting, but I wasn't at the neighborhood meeting. And we don't have enough room between the retaining wall and their fence to plant a tree. There just isn't enough room there. Oh, let me address the situation of them possibly looking outside and seeing the blacktop. I don't think you could see it at all because it's recessed down. There's a fence. If you were in there on their main level, you would never see anything except, and I guess we ought to go back to that cross section if you have that, Brian. The blacktop driveway is quite a ways down below any sight line that they would have. I better grab your, oh, there's one here. Is this a? It is, but where is it? I think it's kind of, okay, there it is. Their homes are built at a grade here and up. Their window on the main floor would be somewhere in here, like this one is. They're not going to be able to see anything here except maybe the deck. You could look across and see the deck and the second floor. That's not too different than a normal subdivision. And the driveway, such as it is down here. So they're not actually going to be able to see that. Let's see.
From upper levels, though?
From an upper level, if you were up in their second floor, yeah, you probably could get an angle down here at the garage door and that deck.
But perhaps not a ton of blacktop?
No, I don't think so. They're 15 feet away from their property line. This is about 50 feet. So from there to here is 65 feet from building to building.
John, I'm sorry to.
Yes.
Can we take a look at that image real quick? Just, again, you've got the retaining wall, then you've got a wall on top of the retaining wall. And this image here makes it look like there's some kind of space for something to grow there. Is that?
There's a wall right there, and below the wall, it's about 2 feet or so. And we would plant something down there, not a tree, but it would be plants that would attempt to hide a retaining wall, because there's a retaining wall about that tall.
Right.
So then we have enough for a planter behind the curb to the wall. And I think that's what you're seeing, that little bit of green that's right in there. We didn't know, when this was rendered, we had no idea whether we could keep some of these trees. And looking at it today even, I'm afraid that the trees that are in a big grove right there can't stay. They may not be that great a tree anyway, but I like keeping trees if we can do it. But the idea of planting trees at the top of that, we can't really do that. There's not enough room to do that. Let's see, parking was a big issue to them until they realized how much parking we'd have. And then I think Mary would agree that that was, once they understood that the design here is slightly different than Dixon Place, and we have 4.3 per spot per unit. Well, this was designed the idea of cutting back to 8 units, it really was, we split this and lost one here because we saw 10 here. It turns out there's 14. I didn't know that. But there were 10 here. We thought, well, 10 will go here. I actually took one out. By taking one out, we dropped to 9, but we also gained 2 end units. And that's kind of nice. So more end units are a good thing. So by losing the 10th one, we ended up getting 2 end units. Basements the finish on the basement is optional. It's about a 300 square foot area down there. And the initial sale, we can either do it for them or not. They're half of the ones we built at Independence Avenue, they had us finish it. To speak to owner-occupied, this would be the same as Dixon Place, which does not allow student rentals per se. And if over at Dixon Place, there's a unit with students, it's a fact that the guy who bought the home is a student. And he has a roommate until he moves his fiance, which will be his wife, in. That has to be the only unit that Mary saw or talked to that has students in it. He's just a student himself and then about to get married, so he's got a roommate. Let's see, but they're definitely Not for batching singles, these aren't designed that. The price point, you asked that, that's a good one, it's about $245,000. So they don't make good investments. In other words, for an investor to try to buy it and come out on the rent, it doesn't work very well. They're big and they're nice and they're expensive. So I'm wondering, did I get all of those answered?
You mentioned something about the public sidewalk really briefly, but she asked if it extends around to the west. On the drawings, it looks like it does.
It absolutely does, yeah. Even in this drawing, we show it there. This exists now, and we add that, and it'll go right up there. It doesn't go this way. Dave Graves told me I have to split it, and so the actual engineering drawings don't show a combination here. Should be combination. It is all the way up that way. It is on this end.
Meaning there'll be a park strip?
Yes.
Yep, same as we have here, yeah.
The reason for the park strip being 4 feet is just to match what's been built elsewhere in the neighborhood, or is that?
Well, it doesn't match because the older stuff, it was a different road standard, but whenever we get the chance to develop a piece of property and get a park strip in, we require that.
Okay, I didn't have any other
I hope
items.
I
John,
got
that I saw. Anybody else note anything that he did not address? Okay.
Maybe the garbage cans, just verify that.
Garbage cans.
Garbage. It'd be the same as Dixon, where they each have their own garbage can in the garage, and once a week, they haul it right up here, and they line them up and pick them up. That's the best way, because there's no garbage truck that wants to drive and back out of there.
Does parking present a problem?
Is it a problem?
I mean, I'm just imagining, given the representation of the parking issues, just getting garbage cans onto the street. I mean, that's not your responsibility. I understand that that's kind of outside your purview, but in other places, is there a way to manage that? You got cars parked on the street, you just haul the garbage cans out in front of the cars?
We haven't run into that problem. So they would bring them up here and put them right there when they need to be picked up. Dixon is really similar. I even took a picture of it the other day of this. There were probably 6 cans. I don't know that every can comes out even every week.
Okay. All right, thanks. We'll turn the conversation about these 2 items back to the Planning Commission, and then following the discussion, I'll look for motions on the items separately, the 2 items separately. Maybe I'll start by saying, I certainly wouldn't want to appear flippant about the parking problems that Mary has talked about and we've heard in relationship to other project proposals. It does seem to me that the applicant has gone above and beyond in providing parking. That's not to say that, we can't anticipate that, but I just don't know that there's, much more that this applicant could do than providing 4 parking spots per unit. And that's how I would assess it.
It's a problem citywide, parking.
Yeah. I mean, certainly I don't want to compare Provo to large metropolitan areas where, it's just a fact of life that you can't park on your street. You park, sometimes 5 streets over and you walk to your house. And, that transition, I understand, from one way of life to another. And sometimes that parking makes it really congested in terms of just getting down the street. And again, I understand the problems that go along with it, but I don't know that we could deny these 2 proposals for that reason, especially given the extent to which they've gone to try to address them on their own.
I'd go a step further even to say I'd almost regret seeing more asphalt and land on a site like this dedicated to parking. I think the number that they have there, the ratio of spaces to unit, even if you assume that they're probably not all always going to be able to fit 2 cars in a 2-car garage. Still, I mean, this for this particular use, that's a pretty healthy number of spaces per unit, I think. So.
Yeah.
I don't see the parking situation changed by building the apartment houses versus the way it is now. If people are parking on the street now from other areas, they're still going to park there on the street. But with 4 spaces per unit, or 4.3, I don't see that the residents are going to impact the on-street parking. And I think the only improvement that this development could make as far as parking goes is to turn all of that into a parking garage. And I'm not suggesting that.
I'll make a motion, and then we can continue discussion after that if we want, but I'd make a motion that we recommend approval of the proposed, we're on 1, right?
Yeah, just, let's do one first. Yeah.
Recommend approval of the proposed rezoning at approximately 925 East, 1140 South, from RC to LDR, consistent with the findings in the staff report.
I second the motion.
Okay. All those in favor of the, is there any discussion on those motions before we take a vote?
I missed seeing who that was. Was that Dave or was that Andrew? Who?
Dave seconded.
Yeah, we had Brian with the motion and then Dave with the second. Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, unless there's further discussion, take a motion on, looking for a motion on item number 2.
I'll continue and
Do it.
Make a motion to approve the proposed site plan as it stands for the Rose Court Townhomes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Were we going to require disclosure documents regarding parking restrictions?
I would make that a friendly amendment to my motion that we add language in there regarding the no parking on the private road with the CRCs.
And would you go as far as say all the staff recommendations?
And staff recommendations, yes.
I don't see how much good that's going to do. I see no objection.
It's
Right.
Yeah, it's just a note.
Okay, so you're adding one, because we said conditionally and then listed those conditions. Is there a 4th condition, or how are you handling that?
No,
Or just those 3?
just to make it clear.
Okay, make it
Yeah.
clear that that's,
It's
okay.
kind of what we discussed.
Yeah, the language on page 3 about the disclosure document is pretty vague about what's included in that disclosure document. So if you can clarify that.
And just for my sake, we're talking about the 3 conditions. So landscaping
Meet all
plan.
city code.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 3 conditions, and the part that I'm specifically talking about is in the paragraph staff analysis and conclusion, where at the end it says, staff would recommend having a disclosure statement within the Rose Court CCNRs, as well as a disclosure document distributed by the developer to any buyer of the units, stating that 950 is off limits or is private property or things like that.
So seconded.
Still second, okay. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, I believe that was unanimous. Thank you very much. We will be moving on to item number 3, which is our last item of the evening. In case you missed the beginning of the meeting, we heard item 4 first. Item number 3, Nathan Chappell requests a zone change from A15 to R18 for 2.29 acres of property located at approximately 1282 North Geneva Road. It's in Lakeview North neighborhood. We have Austin Corey, who's presenting this item to us tonight.
Thank you. This project was presented to you about a year ago with a different application. And the majority of you were still on the Planning Commission at that time, so I won't go into intense details. There is quite a finite amount of detail in the staff report. I'll try to hit the highlights, and feel free to ask any questions if I leave anything unclear. But the subject property you have here highlighted in red, to the right is the general plan. To the left is the existing zoning at the moment. You can see the property is currently zoned agricultural. The proposed subdivision has not been changed from what was presented a year ago as far as lot counts and even where the lot lines are being drawn. The cul-de-sac, it's all the same. You can see the lowest lot there, lot number 7, the farthest south, has an existing home, and lot 2 of the proposed subdivision has an existing home. Those were both built on a 2-lot subdivision that was done in 2007 under the agricultural zoning. Since those homes were built and received their certificate of occupancy, the applicant has subdivided the property further, not through the legal processes of the city, but created some parcels with the county, which has effectively locked this piece of ground until a resolution can be reached, either returning to the original 2-lot subdivision or resolving it through further means. So this would resolve that issue. Let's see. This is just a street view image. On the left is from the northern property corner of Geneva Road looking down. You can see the existing home that's there. That's the one that's being proposed as now a lot 2 of the subdivision. And then on the right-hand side, you can just barely see the corner of the existing home that's right on Geneva Road. So each time the applicants come forward, there has been a neighborhood meeting. The comments have typically been the same. The neighborhood feels and staff supports that feeling. The R110 is the appropriate zoning. That is the one distinction between the application that you heard last year as opposed to what's being heard now. Is last year the request was for R110 zoning with a subdivision being presented that didn't meet the R110 standards. If you recall, the Planning Commission at that time recommended approval of the R110 zoning, understanding that the subdivision itself would have to be modified to meet those standards as far as lot width and lot depth. The application that's before you now, the rezone request, is for R18. R18, as far as lot width and depth, would resolve any of the non-conformance issues that the proposed subdivision had. However, R18 does fall in non-compliance with the the existing policies that are in our current general plan and have been established by the municipal council at this point. Under those reasons and CRC's inability of obtaining enough information from the applicant to verify ability to comply with any other policies or even ordinances, staff is recommending denial of this application.
Thank you, Austin. Are there any questions about this item for Austin? Okay. That will invite Nathan Chappell to come forward and present any information that he feels inclined to do.
I have a letter from a neighbor that he wanted to have read in. He could not be here tonight. He lives in that subdivision.
Okay, maybe you can give that to me. Give that letter to me. Thank you. And when it's public comment, we can look over the letter.
I wrote there, yeah. A couple of 3 photographs. Okay, that one on the left, let's look at that one first. The neighborhood concern, the developer is inhibiting potential rights of adjacent property owners.
If there's a way to speak into the mic, I recognize it's a little bit awkward, but if there's a way to speak in the microphone, that'll help us hear you.
Okay, I think this will answer the question of the neighbors concerning potential development in their area. If you can read that, I'm not saying very well right now. I had to work on my eyes today, so. This came from UDOT saying that they created access all the way up the street. They put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and drive approaches at no cost to any of the neighbors on that side, including a planter strip. And if you go to one of the other photographs, you'll see where they created the approaches. That's not the particular photograph, however. Okay, right there. There's one of the approaches going to one of the lots that UDOT put in. And then there's another one farther up. And in no way is this subdivision blocking any future access. And if they want to do a change, if they want to do a development, they just have to go to Mr. Hoff and ask him, we want to combine properties, we want to make a change, and that can happen. But right now, I'm not inhibiting anything to the north. And I think there's a place in here that was talking about 4 lots per acre. Okay, if I were to put an R18 zone in here, I would still be in compliant with 4 lots per acre. So I don't know where that's coming from. Also on here, you're talking 2.29 acres. Where did that come from? Is that because you took the road out? Because it's 2.83 acres. That's my question. Where did you come up with that?
Sure, to be honest, I can't understand a thing that's being said, but if you got it, go for it.
The 2.29 acres comes from your engineer's drawings and the legal description that was typed up. As far as the access permits, anything that has been provided to staff so far has just verified that drive access is permitted. There's some existing homes that are there, and they're saying that they're not eliminating those drive accesses. I think the neighborhood concerns that have been raised about that is, Alyssa, if we could go back to my presentation documents, please.
Well, Geneva Road is not a limited access road. And if they want to do a different access, all they got to do is...
So you can see in this image, there's some undeveloped agricultural property to the north. There are some existing homes there, but it's, has the same development potential as any of the other areas. The concern is that Geneva would not be able to, by having an actual road access, that this property up here would also not be granted an additional road access because the proximity of intersections would be too close. But that's primarily the neighborhood concern that's been raised as far as the UDOT access, which is not the concerns necessarily raised in the staff report that staff has listed as the main reasons for denial. But I believe that should hopefully add a little bit of clarity as to what's being discussed.
Did you read Mr. Hoff's letter? If they want to combine, they can. If they want to develop, they can. All they got to go do is go make application, like I did for my approval.
You're welcome to ask the chair any of those questions.
Let's move on. All I know is when I met with Mr. Hoff from UDOT, they have no limitations to develop other than what Provo City puts limitations on them. So if they want to combine, if they want to do whatever they want to do, they can go do that. This is not a limited access road. So if it were, then that 300 feet may apply, but in this case it doesn't. So And then let's go back to the subdivision itself. You were talking density. If I were to try to do something different, I would crunch the density up to a point where I could put one more lot in. But that would be physically impossible with Provo City standards. David Day is here, and he knows you have minimum frontage on a cul-de-sac. I could not get one more in there if I wanted to. I've also agreed to do an agreement, a development agreement, that this is what it would be. There would be no more put in. Can you get a bigger blow up of that picture? I'd like to see farther to the south. No, go to your overall map.
We have to call up another map to do that.
What?
We have to call up another map to do that. She's working on it.
Okay. Okay, where's the subject property we're looking at? Can you blow it up bigger?
They're working on it, sir.
That's it. That's the property you want.
Okay, well, that's an older one, but anyway, go down here to 1160 North. That piece of ground that is undeveloped. Yeah, right there. Okay, now pull up some more of my pictures there.
Over left a little bit.
I think that's 3 roads down. Okay, right here we have a 25-foot wide street, no planter strips, and now pull up another picture. Now that's around the corner where you've got the planter strips, the 35-foot wide streets. That's what I'm proposing. Now go to another picture. Okay, right there, that's the backyard of all those twin homes going right up along there. It's 18 feet from the back of the house to the property line. You look between the two, you got 5 feet to property line. And then you go to the front, you've got 18 feet of property line. And I'm talking 3 blocks south of where I'm trying to get a 10,000 square foot minimum subdivision approved. R18, R110, it's a number. So I guess that's all I got to say.
Okay, are there any questions for the applicant?
How long have you owned this property, sir?
Too long. Since, I think 05, 07, 05, something like that.
Thank you.
I've been in here a time or 33, as you know, and trying to get something done. I'm creating a little bit of a problem for some neighbors who have to live there. And so the letter was from one of those neighbors that I have here.
I think most of us are familiar with the project. We'll have a discussion, I'm sure, Mr. Chairman.
I'm, I guess, relatively new here, Mr. Chappell. I wasn't a part of the discussions that you had before with the Planning Commission. The City Council changed the zoning to R110, though.
They recommended R110.
Well, the Planning Commission recommended R110, and that's what the City Council approved, right?
No, the Planning Commission recommended R110. The request was for R110. The Planning Commission recommended approval. The council denied the request.
Largely because the plat wasn't consistent with R110 standards. It didn't meet the R110 zone. So the city council said, if we don't even have a plat that meets the zone, we're going to deny the zone.
We were 5 feet off on a couple of lots. And I understand there's a text amendment in there in the R110 zone coming down the pike, which was recommended for approval by the staff, which would change that, but I don't know when that's going to happen, this year or next year.
I guess my question, and I think maybe understanding the history a little bit more clearly might answer this to some extent, but when you're going to some effort now, making the same application that you made a year or so ago, what in your mind's different? What would lead you to expect to have a different recommendation from the Planning Commission now than before?
I'm asking for an R18, which makes everything there compliant with a development agreement, that nothing would change.
Okay. But it's my understanding that that's what you asked for before. Is that, am I missing
No, I think
that?
I came in as for an R110 before.
110
Before the application was for an R110.
Now I'm trying for an R18 because then I'm compliant.
Okay. Now, from staff's perspective, if the application were for an R110 zone and you had a plat that complied with the standards of the R110 zone, there's a chance that the recommendation would be different from staff.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Is the thing compliant with a 1-8 zone?
The subdivision that
been
you see here?
proposed.
By lot width and lot depth and square footage, yes. But we haven't been able to verify a few other things, primarily some public works things, simply because it's not being provided to us at this time.
I see.
Okay. We're going to move to public comments. We'll begin with the neighborhood chair from the Lakeview North neighborhood.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks, Beth.
There is a very long, tumultuous history with this property. I'm not even going to go into any of the details. I'm just going to start with what we can do to move forward. I think it's time that we start actually moving forward on this. The agreement before you was put together by a committee in the neighborhood. This is not a community development agreement. This is an agreement with the neighborhood with Mr. Chappell. There has been history of needing written agreements. The first agreement is that it would be zoned an R110 zone and that lot lines would move and appropriate to fit that R110 zone in. If I understand that correctly, that means the lot lines would have to shift around. The second one, oh, sorry. I always get nervous up here. I'm sorry.
Be on this side.
No, thank you. I will stay on this side. The second one, oh shoot, I forgot what the second one was.
A block plan with cul-de-sac location.
Yes, thank you. A block plan, and that's already in the general plan, is that when you're developing within a block, you provide a block plan for the entire, block. There has been some that's been written up by community development that he could just adopt if he wanted to. I haven't seen any block plans from Mr. Chappell himself, though. The third one is UDOT approval for not only his street, but another street to the north. The issue with the UDOT access is the fact that when I called UDOT a year and a half ago, I asked them if he had permission to put this road in. UDOT said, well, yes, it meets the minimum requirement to go from 1210 to this, which is, I think, about 350 feet. The problem is, from this road to 1390, it is not enough foot,
Separation?
thank you, not enough separation to put a second access road to develop the properties to the north. That's why the concern from the neighborhood is you are landlocking those properties to not be able to develop. That has been an issue because previously Mr. Chappell was not asked not to build that house there so that the lands north could be accessed through his property, and yet he chose to build the house there. So the third recommendation is to get written approval from UDOT for both of those road accesses so that development can go forward along the entire block of Geneva. The fourth one is that front lot, if it is R110 zone and the lot lines are adjusted, that means that lot number 1 would not be able to be built upon. And we would ask that no variance be sought after. And we recommend that if there's no variance sought after, use it as green space or sell it to a contiguous property owner, which would be the Merediths or the Weeks. I guess you could do lot 7, they're contiguous too, but that's across the street. But with these in place, considering the interesting aspects of the subdivision, the neighborhood could get behind this and say, let's move forward, let's build a community, let's get going on this. I'm really hoping that we can find compromise here, and that's what I have to say. Have any questions for me?
Any
I
questions?
applaud your efforts to try to ameliorate the situation.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Okay, are there any other neighborhood chairs here who wish to address this item? I will invite anyone from the public who wishes to address this item to come forward now. Okay. It's all yours.
I don't have any written statement or anything. So yeah, I live in lot, I guess it would be 7. It's 1282 North Geneva Road.
Can you state your name?
You'll state your name, sorry.
Sorry, my name is Mike Elms. And I live at, on lot 7, 1282 North Geneva Road. So I bought the house in 2010. So when I bought the house, I was actually under the impression that, you know, kind of that area was going to be developed and the road was going to be put back there. And, you know, that was me kind of being a naive 22-year-old. I didn't really do my due diligence, right? But at the time, you know, in front of the house, there was no curb and gutter. There was no, you know, shoulder to Geneva Road. It was just mud. And I submitted a picture to the council showing kids just, you know, walking on Geneva Road to go to school. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's a 45-mile-an-hour zone. And since it's full of mud, they're walking on the street. And so, you know, for a while, I was just hoping that this could all get developed so that we could put the infrastructure in place to where we could have a sidewalk and it would be safe. That obviously hasn't happened. And since then, we've worked with Nate, and he's actually gone ahead and put the sidewalk in anyway, even though he technically didn't have to. And I'm really grateful for that, and I'm grateful that, yeah, I mean, there's not kids walking down the street. And my car's not getting stuck in the mud trying to get to my house. You know, as far as the compromises that were, you know, suggested, I don't really have a comment. I mean, you know, I'd love for there to be something that we can do to get this developed. I mean, I'd love to have a street where my boy can ride his bike, where it's safe. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, essentially my house right now is zoned as agriculture, and I'm not a farmer, right? The Merediths, they're not farmers. You know, we don't have animals on the property, and so we feel like to have our property zoned as agriculture is a little bit ridiculous. I think that if we had chickens, people would probably get upset, right? And from what I have understood, the lot sizes that Nate is proposing is no smaller than the lots that are surrounding the area. Again, I could be wrong, but I think that is the case, that he's saying that he's going to guarantee that all the lots are going to be 10,000 square feet, which would be bigger than the surrounding areas. The houses would be new, they would be large, they would increase the value of revenue coming into the city. So I think that it would be a great thing, and I hope that we can come up with some sort of a compromise to get this issue resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? I don't know that I want to take the time to read all of the letter from Mr. Meredith, with which Mr. Chappell forwarded, but I'll kind of move through this quickly. So this is from John Meredith at 1304 North Geneva Road, who must live in the other lot in this development proposal. I'm writing voice my support that the property at 1290 North Geneva Road be rezoned from agricultural to R18, and that the development be approved to move forward. Lived in the home for 4+ years. Similar to the previous comment, It's their understanding when they moved in that the other lots, surrounding lots would be developed. Nice homes like ours would be destructed. That's not happened. It's feeling that those who are opposed live miles away from the proposed development. And even people that work for the city of Provo have led me to the conclusion that the only reason they are all against this development is because of their personal dislike for Mr. Nate Chappell. Current neighborhood chair Beth Alligood is on record with the Provo City Council saying that we don't believe that Mr. Chappell should profit from past bad behavior. I'm not sure what bad behavior she was talking about. Many of the other people that we attend church with have expressed their dislike for Mr. Chappell as their reason for opposing development. Our neighbors to the north and northeast would rather not have houses built because it would block their view. They are to the south, so I'm not sure what view they are blocking. Said I've been to various neighborhood meetings where Mr. Chappell's been in attendance, so as planning commission, city council meetings. He's offered ground to the neighborhood to the north, offered to purchase their house for fair market value, extended sewer mains to the Weeks property, where they were able to connect onto the sewer main at no charge for the extension. And this latest plan submittal even paid for and provided several plans as to how this property could be developed in the future. And yet I've heard that he hasn't reached out to the community. I'm not sure what else Mr. Chappell is supposed to do. Okay. And I think the rest of it is just I don't know that the rest of it is adds to anything that's already been said here. But I'll pass this around for others to look at. Okay, unless there's any other comment from the public, we'll return it to the Planning Commission for a discussion and then a motion.
I make a motion that we recommend that the council deny the proposed zone map and amendment as proposed.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there any discussion on the motion before we move forward at all?
I second the
Second,
motion.
okay.
Yeah.
And along with that, I made the motion, but I want to talk about it for 2 seconds. I think, and maybe altruistically and hopefully, that the planning department is here to help people get things done in Provo and not only as a stop. And I think that I don't understand why this has come over and over and over. I think this is my third time hearing this, but it seems like if there was some sit down and some back and forth and some redlining and discussion with the applicant and the planning department, that there could come out a plan of what is possible to be put there, given the 2 homes that are already built there out of regulation, that really tie your hands to what you can do with that now. Given UDOT, needing to have or give kind of a written or approval, some sort of approval for the road access there, I think you could come out with something that you could get this done or could have had this done potentially years ago. So I would recommend that this not come before this body again until that's happened. I fully agree that something can go there that's awesome, that fits in with the rest of the neighborhood, and that lets you change the zone to what it should be and puts homes on there, whether it be 4 new ones or 5, I don't know. But I think that's my reason for recommending that we deny it or recommend denial.
Mrs. Winden.
I would like to commend the neighborhood chair and the neighborhood for wanting to move on and for putting forth some really good ideas here for how to do that. But I also want to say that this just shows the importance of approaching a project the right way from the very beginning and getting approval from all the necessary parties right up front so that you're not constantly trying to come back and get things right after you've already started a project. So I have to agree that this needs to be denied at this point, but keep working and getting the right zone for this property. I think that the two homes that are there and the families that are there deserve to have neighbors, and as well as the rest of the neighborhood, so that this can be laid to rest.
Okay, any other?
Question for staff. This really honestly is not terribly relevant for me relative to the zone change, but looking at the lots, I mean, most of them are 10,000 square feet and larger, 7 lots. Do you have a guess as to what this would look like if it did comply with lot width requirements and different things like that for the R110 zone? We'd be talking about 6 lots, 5 lots?
For R110, you would end up losing lot 1 primarily because the existing home has no other room to move that lot line. So it's more about the existing homes that have kind of tied what the applicant's proposing. So lot 1 would be unable to comply with R110 standards, so you would lose that lot.
The specific standards lot depth there, is that it?
Lot width for lot 1, and lot 7 is also shy on depth requirements, but that could be made up by adjusting the lines around the project.
So you'd potentially go from 7.
You'd go from 7 to 6.
Okay.
You know, I'd just like to say that I sympathize with the neighbors here, and looking at the area, it's on the border of both R118 and R110. And I understand that the long-term goal, and I'm in agreement with it, on R110 would be my preference. But this particular lot doesn't, it's on a border of either one. I think it could go either way and still turn out to be a good project. I am also concerned about the landlocking of those other neighbors. I would like to have some confirmation from UDOT that that can be worked out.
Okay. Let's take a vote on the motion that's on the table. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed to the motion? Okay, thank you. We're done with the public hearings, items 1 through 4. There's an administrative item, the election of a new chair and vice chair. Do we have here who we need here to move forward with that? We have 6 of our 9. It's about as many as we normally have, it seems. So let's move on to that item. Election of a new chair and vice chair. You don't, sir. You can respond by working with the city, working with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Just a question, is it customary to change annually, or is it?
It's in the bylaws that we, every year, have a new chair and vice chair.
Okay.
Is there one amongst us that would like to serve, that could lead us?
Well, see, and I really only know Deborah that's not here. Because she's not here, it just seems sensible that she'd get nominated as the chair. She's done a very good job a few times in the past. So I guess I'll make that motion if that's appropriate.
I think
Nomination.
it's an apropos punishment for not being here.
That's the way it works, right? You're either at the table or something else, so.
Okay. Are there any other recommendations or volunteers for chair or vice chair?
Do you want to do them both at the same time, or do you want to do chair first and then vice chair?
I think you do them
I
separately.
recommend you do them
Well,
separately, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we can do them separately, but I think what I'm asking is if there are, maybe I should rephrase that question and say, are there any other members of the planning commission that would be willing to serve as chair?
I would be willing. I've done it before. I'd rather see somebody else that hasn't done it do it, so.
Okay. I mean, certainly in the past, one of the issues that we've had under consideration is kind of the ability to be here relatively consistently. I know that, is Kermit still on? No. So when last time, Kermit said, I have some new responsibilities that would, are going to prevent me from being here. Certainly that's another thing that we'd want. Deborah seems consistent enough.
It can't be
Except-
Brian.
Except for when it matters most.
In my opinion, it can't be Brian, just because then we'll struggle with somebody to make motions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will vote for myself just for that reason, then I don't have to make it anymore.
Okay. So Deborah's been nominated. She's not here to respond to that nomination.
Defend herself, yeah.
With no other names forthcoming, we'll, I guess, take a vote. All those in favor of Deborah Jensen serving as our next City Planning Commission Chair?
Aye.
Aye.
I nominate Dave Anderson,
job.
Vice Chair.
I'll nominate Jamin Rowan to be vice chair.
I'll second.
I don't think I can do that, can I?
From chair to vice chair, sure.
That's a great idea.
I'll also nominate Brian Smith to be the vice chair.
Already been there. Someone else's turn.
We need a seasoned veteran in that position.
Okay. We have 3 names on the table. Although,
I respectfully withdraw my name
I
and
second.
wholeheartedly promote Dave's name.
okay.
Would you be able to do it as vice chair?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. As
It's a
would.
good choice.
I think that's a natural, honestly.
I do. Yeah.
What's so natural about flip-flopping
seems a little
Deborah
awkward.
and I? It seems very highly unnatural. All those in favor of Dave Jensen, no, Anderson, sorry. I always have a hard time with your last name, Dave, for some reason. All those in favor of Dave Anderson serving as the vice chair?
Aye.
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 Nay.
All those in favor of Jamin Rowan? All right. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
I don't know if that had the proper formality to it, but I think we came out.
I formally make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Second. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.